Did you know that Max Verstappen skipped Media Day in Miami just before one of the most important races of the year? What many thought was a simple absence could be a more calculated move than you might imagine. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think Verstappen really wanted to avoid the press? Was it a family decision or part of a strategy at a key moment in the championship? Before addressing Max Verstappen's absence directly, we must first understand why the 2025 Miami Grand Prix is one of the most important weekends of the season. Miami isn't just another venue on the calendar. It's an event that combines speed, pressure, spectacle, and tight logistics like few others. Since its debut in 2022, the race has gained momentum, both due to its strategic location in the United States and the technical complexity of the circuit. In 2025, the Miami International Autodrome layout maintains its demanding characteristics, a mix of tight corners, high-speed zones, and above all, an ambient temperature that demands the driver's physical fitness and the car's performance to the maximum. Any miscalculation on this circuit can be costly, especially when the calendar is as compressed as this year's. Adding even more pressure is the sprint format. Unlike a traditional race weekend, everything happens much more quickly here. A single free practice session on Friday, followed that same day by sprint qualifying. The sprint race takes place on Saturday and the Grand Prix on Sunday. This structure not only shortens preparation and analysis time, but also forces teams to make strategic decisions almost immediately with limited data and few opportunities to correct mistakes. In this context, the driver's presence from Thursday onwards is more valuable than ever, as meetings with engineers, media interviews, and review of previous data become key elements for optimal performance. All of this highlights why Verstappen's absence from Media Day is not a minor detail, but one that could disrupt his preparation for a critical race. Furthermore, it must be considered that Verstappen arrives in Miami under unusually high pressure for his standards. After years of near-absolute dominance, he now sits in third place in the championship behind two McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. McLaren has not only achieved 3 victories so far this season, but also appears to have found a technical balance that has challenged Red Bull's performance. The gap is no longer so clear, and every point matters. Therefore, any factor that could affect the Dutch driver's preparation, such as missing the Media Day or arriving late to the track, takes on a much greater dimension. Red Bull is aware of this. The Austrian team is not in a comfortable position and needs Verstappen to be 100% from the first minute. The decision to miss Thursday's race in Miami, although completely justified for personal reasons, also means losing valuable adaptation time on a circuit that has proven to be harsh on those who don't arrive in tune. The combination of the demanding layout, the sprint format, and the current situation in the championship places Verstappen in a situation where every move is watched and analyzed down to the last detail. It's not just a matter of competing, it's a matter of responding to the mounting pressure. Now that we're clear on why the Miami setting is so crucial for Verstappen and Red Bull, we can move on to what really sparked the conversation on social media and in the media, the reasons behind his absence, and the multiple interpretations it has generated within the Formula One community. Now that we understand the magnitude of the Miami Grand Prix and why every minute counts on a sprint weekend like this, it's time to review what exactly happened with Max Verstappen. The first thing to clarify is that this isn't just an unexplained absence. On May 1st, Red Bull Racing issued an official statement confirming that Verstappen would not be present at the Media Day activities scheduled for Thursday in Miami. The reason? The birth of his first child, the fruit of his relationship with Kelly Piquet, daughter of legendary 3-time world champion Nelson Piquet. Although the announcement seemed to put an end to any speculation, the truth is that it left more questions than it answered, especially because the driver's personal situation coincided with a key moment in the championship, and that always leaves room for debate. Kelly Piquet's pregnancy had been public knowledge since December 2024. The specialized media and fans knew the birth was imminent, but most expected it to take place a week later, without interfering with the Grand Prix. However, the early delivery forced Verstappen to remain in Europe until the last minute, sparking a wave of rumors and reactions among fans and the press. What many didn't know was that that same Thursday afternoon, the driver's private jet, a Falcon 8X, was tracked leaving Nice, very close to his residence in Monaco, heading directly to Miami. This detail, although seemingly trivial, was interpreted by some as a sign that the birth had already occurred or was in its final moments. Even so, neither Red Bull nor Verstappen's entourage offered any additional details. They simply assured him that everything is fine and that Max would arrive on time for Friday's training. The way communication was handled also deserves attention. The tone of Red Bull's statement was emphatic on one point: privacy. In an age where fans expect constant updates and instant photos, the team decided to protect the driver's personal details and not provide further explanations. And while that stance is perfectly understandable from a human perspective, it also left an informational void that was quickly filled by speculation, theories, and alternative interpretations. It's important to emphasize that these types of situations, where a driver's private life interferes with his on-track responsibilities, are not new. However, what sets Verstappen's case apart is the context in which it occurs. A tight championship, a sprint format with no room for error, and a driver under pressure to make up ground. It's also key to understand that although Verstappen didn't participate in the media day, his absence doesn't formally affect his participation in the race. Formula One rules allow for a certain degree of flexibility when it comes to press commitments, especially if there are compelling personal reasons. But that doesn't mean his decision doesn't have an impact in sporting terms. Thursday isn't just a day for interviews and photo shoots. It's a time when drivers meet with their engineers, analyze simulations, review previous telemetry, and begin mentally adjusting their strategy for the weekend. Skipping that initial stage means, in practice, starting the race with less preparation than the rest. And although Max Verstappen has shown in the past that he can adapt quickly, no one can ignore that his start in Miami will be affected by this delay. With all this information on the table, a new dimension of analysis now opens up: the response of the community, both among fans and the media, and how this absence has been interpreted in a context where every gesture and every omission takes on greater significance. Reactions were swift, and as is often the case in Formula One, not everyone saw it the same way. With Red Bull's official confirmation and Verstappen's trip to Miami already underway, the spotlight quickly shifted to other terrain: public reactions, social media rumors, and theories that began circulating on specialized forums. Because in Formula One, facts are often just the starting point. What really fuels the conversation is what could be behind those events. And Verstappen's absence from the media day, just before a sprint weekend with the championship at stake, was fertile ground for all kinds of interpretations. Some viewed the situation sympathetically and celebrated the driver's prioritizing his personal life, but others, with a more suspicious outlook, began to wonder if there was something more behind this perfectly opportune absence. One of the most repeated comments on platforms like Reddit, Twitter, and even specialized programs was that Verstappen, known for his apathy toward media commitments, had found a personal way out to avoid press day at this time. Many recall that Max has been critical on several occasions regarding his relationship with the media. In previous interviews, he has been blunt and unwilling to participate in dynamics that he does not consider beneficial to his on-track performance. Earlier this year, at a press conference, he uttered a phrase that was recorded: "Just commentate," in response to Sky F1's David Croft, which made clear his weariness with certain questions. Thus, when it was announced that he would not be present on Thursday in Miami, some users were quick to joke: "Don't you want interviews? Have your child born right before a sprint?" A joke, yes, but also a reflection of the perception many have of his personality. These types of reactions also open the debate about how much public figures, especially in a sport as media-heavy as Formula One, have the leeway to set boundaries between their personal lives and their professional obligations. In this case, given the birth of his first child, no one can question the validity of the reason. However, the coincidence with a sprint format, more demanding and with less preparation time, raised suspicions that the timing was, if not deliberate, at least well used. Some media outlets even analyzed Verstappen's pattern of behavior in previous weeks, noting that he had reduced his public activity and exposure to interviews. Others pointed out that these types of decisions are not made in isolation. A driver of his caliber has a public relations team, image consultants, and a technical team behind him, who likely also welcomed a brief respite from the media pressure in Miami. This isn't the first time a driver's personal life has generated a media storm. Cases like Sebastian Vettel's absence for the birth of his child, or Lewis Hamilton's, who missed official events in 2020 after testing positive for COVID-19, are clear precedents. But what sets this case apart is the combination of sporting context, the driver's reputation, and the weekend structure. While in other cases the absence had a medical reason or an indisputable urgency, here what many interpret as a calculated decision, disguised as a personal priority. And while there is no evidence to confirm this interpretation, the simple fact that it is a credible possibility is enough to keep the conversation alive on social media and sports media. In this sense, Red Bull's communication management has also been the subject of analysis. Its decision not to offer additional details, to avoid explicit confirmations about the baby's birth, and to not allow questions about it was interpreted by some as an attempt to control the narrative. However, in an era where fans track private flights and analyze every social media post, silence doesn't always help calm the waters. On the contrary, it could fuel even more speculation. And that's exactly what happened. As Verstappen traveled to Miami, thousands of fans debated whether his absence was necessary or strategic, and whether this move, voluntary or not, could have sporting consequences this weekend. Now that we've seen how the media and fans reacted, what's important to analyze is the real impact this absence could have on Verstappen's performance, especially considering the weekend format and the close championship situation. Because beyond the theories, there's a sporting reality that can't be ignored. Every detail counts when you're fighting point by point for the world lead. Beyond the ironic comments, rumors, or theories that have emerged surrounding Max Verstappen's absence, what really matters, at least from a sporting perspective, is how this episode could affect his performance during the Miami Grand Prix. Because one thing is clear, Verstappen doesn't enter this race as the championship leader, and that's already an unusual situation for him. After 5 rounds, he sits in 3rd place in the championship, behind the 2 McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris. This points gap isn't huge, 12 with Piastri and 10 with Norris, but it does represent a notable change from previous years, where Verstappen dominated easily from the opening races. What's most significant is that this disadvantage has occurred in a season where every detail counts, especially on a calendar with multiple sprint weekends, as is the case in Miami. In this context, losing a day of activities, however justified, represents a strategic loss. Thursday's media day, while heavily communicative, also includes technical meetings with engineers, analysis of prior data, and the opportunity to adapt simulations to the actual condition of the track. With the sprint format, this type of work cannot be postponed. On Friday morning, there is only one free practice session before heading straight into sprint qualifying, meaning teams must arrive with everything sorted out in advance. For Verstappen, this means that every hour out of the paddock means one less hour of preparation, and while he has a tremendous ability to adapt quickly, his margin for error is drastically reduced. The simple fact that other drivers have had more time to adjust their setups or detect irregularities in the cars could become a real advantage. Added to this is the fact that Red Bull, while still competitive, no longer has the absolute dominance it displayed in previous seasons. McLaren's 3 wins in 5 races are no coincidence. They are the result of effective technical development, particularly in terms of aerodynamics and corner exit traction. And while Red Bull hopes that the regulatory changes planned for the Spanish Grand Prix will affect McLaren, especially regarding front wing flexibility, those limitations do not yet apply in Miami. Therefore, Max faces a scenario where he needs to squeeze the maximum out of his car from the very first minute, with no room for hesitation. And doing so after arriving with less preparation than the rest is not ideal. In a traditional format, a slower start could have been allowed, but in this compressed format, any hesitation can translate into a poor qualifying or, worse yet, a poor starting position for the sprint race. It's not just about the technical aspects. There's also a mental dimension that must be taken into account. Max arrives in Miami emotionally charged with the birth of his son, which, while undoubtedly a profoundly positive event on a personal level, can also affect his focus. Emotional management is a key factor in Formula One, where concentration levels are extreme. A driver needs to be completely focused, not only during the race, but from the moment he steps into the paddock. Lack of sleep, jet lag after a last-minute transatlantic flight, and the emotional upheaval of becoming a father for the first time are all elements that, although invisible to fans, can impact performance. Add to that the pressure of having to recover championship points, and it's clear that Verstappen will have to exert more mental and physical effort than usual to remain competitive throughout the weekend. Another key aspect is how this situation affects teamwork within Red Bull. When a driver is not present during the initial preparation phase, engineers must make decisions with incomplete information or less direct interaction. While historical data and simulations help, nothing replaces the real-time feedback that the driver himself can provide. This can force the team to make more conservative decisions in car setup, which in turn can limit on-track performance. In a race as tight as this one, those small adjustments can mean the difference between starting on the front row or being stuck in the middle of the pack. And if Max doesn't secure a good position in the sprint qualifying, his path to the important points on Sunday will be much more uphill. With all this at stake, the question that inevitably arises is whether Verstappen will once again manage to overcome adversity and turn a potentially disadvantageous situation into a show of character. His track record in Miami favors him. He has won there in 2 of the 3 editions contested, including a victory in 2023 after starting the weekend with setup issues. But this time the circumstances are different, and the room for maneuver is much narrower. Now the challenge is twofold: recover points in the standings, and do so under reduced preparation, while the media environment continues to focus on him. The next section will allow us to look ahead and analyze what we can realistically expect from Verstappen this weekend, and how this episode could influence not only the immediate result, but also the development of the rest of the season. With everything we already know about the championship context, the weekend's tight structure, and the potential impact of Verstappen's initial absence, it's time to look ahead and ask ourselves, what can we really expect from him in Miami? This race isn't just another one on the calendar. It represents a crucial test of both his personal performance and the overall strength of Red Bull. And while uncertainty is high due to his late arrival and the personal circumstances surrounding him, there are also elements that suggest Verstappen can turn pressure into motivation. It wouldn't be the first time he's done so. In fact, his career has been marked by precisely that: overcoming adversity at key moments and emerging stronger just when others doubt his ability to stay at the top. One of the reasons he can't be ruled out is his track record. Verstappen has proven comfortable in Miami from the start. He won resoundingly in 2022 and repeated his feat in 2023 despite facing a less-than-ideal car setup during practice. This ability to quickly adapt to conditions, read the circuit almost instinctively, and adjust his driving style in real time is one of the qualities that sets him apart from the rest. While he didn't win in 2024, on that occasion, Lando Norris took the win in a McLaren that surprised everyone. The track remains one of the most favorable for his style: technical, fast, and physically demanding, which rewards drivers with determination and composure under pressure. Another point in his favor is the type of format that will be contested. Although the sprint weekend reduces preparation time, it also limits the opportunities for other drivers to extend their advantage. Short sessions force quick decisions, and that levels the playing field in some ways. Verstappen, known for his controlled aggression and confidence in race pace, could find in this format a setting where his experience outweighs prior preparation. Furthermore, it must be remembered that on these types of weekends, mistakes are punished more severely. A bad lap in qualifying or a poorly executed strategy can put any driver out of contention. And that's where Verstappen usually excels. His consistency and ability to minimize errors have made him one of the most efficient drivers of the modern era. However, this doesn't mean everything is in his favor. The flight time, the possible jet lag, the physical strain of the lightning trip from Europe, and the emotional burden of having become a father just a few hours earlier are all factors that could take their toll. Unlike other weekends, there's no room for gradual adaptation here. Max will have to hit the track from the first lap with the same intensity as the others, with no room for slipping, no room for hesitation. And all this is happening at a time when his team, Red Bull, needs a flawless performance more than ever to avoid losing ground to McLaren. In this sense, not only is the result of a race at stake, but also the tone that will set the next stage of the championship. From a strategic perspective, Red Bull has prepared everything to minimize the effects of his absence. The team has gathered all possible data during simulations and has relied on its other driver for track information during the start of the weekend. But no matter how much planning is done, nothing replaces the physical presence of the lead driver from the very beginning. The setup, the feeling with the car, and the micro-decisions made in the opening laps are key to defining the rest of the weekend. And that's where the anticipation turns into tension. Will Max be able to find that perfect balance between the emotional and the competitive, between his role as a father and his role as a champion? That ultimately is the question on everyone's mind. So, with all this at stake, the Miami Grand Prix presents itself as more than just a race. It's a test of character, of mettle, of focus. And not just for Verstappen, but also for Red Bull, which must prove it can still successfully adapt to a season more challenging than ever. Now that we have a complete picture of the context, the facts, and the impact of the situation, it's time to ask ourselves, how might all this influence the long-term relationship between Max Verstappen and his team? Because beyond the immediate outcome, there are internal dynamics that could begin to change.